And Janzu sent the sure shoes. That could be a tongue twister. Hello there. Burrito therapy is just sorting something out quickly, so until then, we're going to have a bit of recreational reading time. So, yeah, in terms of where we're up, the sure shoes are attacking Kiyoshi and the gang in the criminal underworld place. Because Janzu is a political guy who wants us dead. So, spread out, Rangi said, eyeing the ground. Shouldn't we stay close? Kiyoshi said. No, Rangi said. Then it'll get more than one of us in a single bite. Kiyoshi may have been feeling warm with newfound camaraderie for her gang, but no one had told Wong and Kirima. After hearing Rangi, they immediately leaped onto the roof of the nearest house, elements trailing below the soles of their feet, leaving her and Kiyoshi down below. The soil loosened around them, a perfect circle caving in. Rangi tackled Kiyoshi out of the center of the formation, boosting herself sideways with flame jets from her feet. They landed hard on their sides, shoulders bruising. The creature burst through the surface, rearing toward the sky, the ground giving birth to a shape of death that blacked out the sun above. There was a zipping sound, and then a thud. The animal screamed, and its claws came down short of Kiyoshi and Rangi's bodies. It shook its head furiously. Another impact, and this time Kiyoshi saw it. A smooth, fist-sized stone had struck the beast hard on the tip of its sensitive nose, sending it reeling. She looked up and made out Lek's silhouette on the roof of their inn, the sun behind him shrouding his face. Move, maybe? He shouted. A hail of perfectly aimed stones gave them cover, each missile landing uncannily on the one spot that the animal seemed to feel pain, no matter how much it thrashed about. It backed away, trying to hide its nose, as Kiyoshi and Rangi fled towards Lek. Several arrows stuck it in its hind quarters. It turned to face the new threat. The Daofei had gotten over their surprise and were now mobbing the beast, thrusting spears at it and pricking its fur with short bows. They sought the glory of bringing it down. The animal lashed out with its tongue, sending a row of men falling to the ground. But more swordsmen turned hunters stepped over their limp bodies to replace them. It's okay, Burrito, no worries. We'll be back after these messages. I'll just keep reading while you're sorting things out. Stepped over their limp bodies to replace them. Kiyoshi didn't care to understand the bizarre scene playing out before her. She and the rest of the group ran for the hills. They arrived at Peng Peng's cave in the mountainside, winded, their legs and lungs burning, to find Lauge feeding the bison a pile of cabbages. He tossed them one at a time high in the air for Peng Peng to catch it between her broad, flat teeth. There was probably no use asking him how he'd acquired the produce. A lot of help you were, Lek shouted. He was assuming, like Kiyoshi was at this point, that Lauge was completely aware of what had transpired. The old man gave him a pitying look. Fighting a Shirshu? That's just a bad investment of effort. I left as soon as I felt it coming. You knew what that abomination was? Kirima said. It's a legendary subterranean beast that hunts by scent, he explained dismissively, like they would have known this if they'd paid better attention to his ramblings. Supposedly it can track its quarry across stone, water, dirt, thin air. In the old days, Earth Kings would use them to execute their political enemies. For the traitor, let them be hounded by Kiyoshi until they drop where they stand, far from their homes and the bones of their ancestors. Ooh. Lauga fed Pang Pang another cabbage. Or, at least that's how the saying went. Kiyoshi haven't been seen in the wild for at least a generation, so I assumed this one was being used to hunt a fugitive too. Same as in the days of yore. Kiyoshi felt Lek's gaze boring into her. It was going for you, he said. I could see it from the roof of the inn. It was sniffing out your scent. You brought it here. She hesitated. Had she been as smooth as Yun, she could have come up with a convincing denial on the spot. Before she could say anything, she was preempted by the metallic clanking of blades. At the back of the group, exhorting them onward, was Brother Y. Mock's Inquisitor looked like he wished to speak with whomever he was searching for very much. I can explain, Kiyoshi said quickly, but maybe once we're in the air? Well, Kiyoshi got jokes. Anyway, there was silent and unanimous agreement as they scrambled onto Peng Peng. The truth took a back seat to survival. Well. Oh, new chapter, The Avatar's Masters. Yeah. Peng Peng graced the skies over the plains of Ba Sing Se. The impenetrable city watched them pass like a silent sentry, the monolithic brown walls a blank face devoid of features. Kiyoshi watched the capital sail by. Somewhere in the center of those titanic fortifications was the Earth King, nominally the most powerful person on the continent, with armies to command and the wealth of a world at his disposal. Though she'd never dug deep into history lessons, she knew that the records were full of instances where avatars and Earth Kings came to each other's aid. And yet, she couldn't go ask him for help. There were no means for a peasant to approach the Earth King that wouldn't result in immediate refusal or capture or death. Moreover, courts and cities were Jianzu's realm. He'd spent decades cultivating influence among the bureaucrats of Ba Sing Se. Barging in there would be no better than surrendering to Governor Deng back in Chameleon Bay. She looked at her parents' gang. These were the people she could trust, as sad as that was. Out there was a city that essentially belonged to the enemy. Her allies could fit on the back of a single bison. And they weren't happy with her right now. All right, spill it, Karima snapped. Who is this man you're feuding with? You said he was a rich and powerful sage. Which one exactly? Tell us the truth. Kiyoshi stared at the saddle floor before she'd felt within her rights, keeping his name a secret. But the decision seemed completely foolish in retrospect. Jianzu, Kiyoshi said weakly. Jianzu, the companion of Kuruk. The architect? The architect? Lauga said, rubbing his chin. You aim high, my dear. I'm impressed. The rest of them were not as amused. Their jaws dropped in chorus. Jianzu the Gravedigger? Lek yelled. You picked a fight with a Gravedigger? I didn't pick the fight, Kiyoshi protested. I wasn't lying when I said he killed 2 people I loved. Oh no, we believe that, Karima shouted. We can believe that plenty. That man has a higher body count than Septapox. Oh, that reminds me of... Anyway, sorry. Oh. And you ticked him off so badly that he sent a beast out of myth to track you and all the... to track you all the way to the Taihua Mountains, Wong said, with a sigh. We might as well jump off Ping Ping right now and save ourselves the trouble. Thanks a lot, you numbskull, Lex said. We had a chance of surviving Mok, but if the butcher of Zulu Pass wants you feeding the worms, then it's only a matter of time before he puts you and us below ground. So Kiyoshi wasn't the only one terrified of him. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. That made her feel like she was standing on firmer footing. Outlaws were perhaps the one group who would understand how brutal and dangerous Jiangsu was. She closed her eyes. She hadn't known these people for very long, but to her own surprise, more than anyone's, she would have felt intolerably guilty if Jiangsu's efforts to capture her caused them any grievous harm. They deserved not to be swindled, was the way she'd put it. They were owed the full story. He's not trying to kill me, Kiyoshi said. He doesn't want me dead. Well, that would be new for him, Karima said. How are you so privy to his inner thoughts and goals? Because, she took a deep breath to steady herself, I'm the Avatar. It was the first time she'd ever knowingly said the truth out loud. Somehow, she'd managed to avoid speaking those 3 specific words, that specific order to Rangi the night they fled Yokoya in the drenching wet rain. Rangi had already known the Avatar was either her or Yun, so context sufficed. Kiyoshi's confession hung in the air, as visible as smoke. She waited for the rest of them to recover from the blow that had staggered Rangi, Kelsang, and everyone else who belonged to the small circle of knowledge at one time or another. They might have needed a moment to recalibrate their view of the world. Ha! Lex said. Ha! Or maybe they'd just laugh in her face. Lek rolled back on the floor of the saddle, finding her moment of ultimate honesty a good joke, a relief from his jangled nerves. You, the Avatar? Man, I have heard some whoppers, but that might be the best one yet. I know I let you gloss over a bunch of the oaths, Karima said to her, but at least 5 of them are about never lying to your sworn family. She is the Avatar, Rangi said. Why do you think she has a Fire Nation bodyguard? Dunno, Wong said with a shrug. He pointed his thumb at Karima. Why do you think we've got her? The waterbender gave him a dirty look before continuing. Look, you can believe in your weird little 2-person cult all you want, she said to Kiyoshi. Just tell us what you stole from the gravedigger. You wouldn't be the first servant who bungled a theft and had to flee from their angry boss. Kiyoshi couldn't believe it. She'd had it all wrong. She'd thought that her avatarhood was the final secret, a guilt.
Sorry.
Yo, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, is everything okay?
Yeah, no, everything's fine. Sorry, my mum, she was leaving, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's
sure
going
thing.
to my cousin's birthday. She's going to a party.
Nice. I'm wishing a happy birthday for him. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how old he is, but he's little. He's a kid.
Small bean.
Under 10, yeah.
Shall we continue?
Yep, we can continue.
Okay then.
Sorry for the wait.
Nah, not so. Oh my god! Oh, you have no.
Them.
You have to shoot the walls.
forwards. Yeah, forwards,
Oh,
please.
yep, for
Okay,
sure.
hold on.
Yeah.
Kitty, I'm trying to play. I'll be back, one sec.
No prob. Kiyoshi couldn't believe it. She had it all wrong. She thought that her avatarhood was the final secret, a gilded treasure that needed to be kept in a series of locked chests until the exact right moment. It turned out that without proof, the information was worth less than the paper it was written on. She squeezed one of the fans in her belt out of frustration. Do you even bend all four elements? Wong said. Do you? I firebent once, she said, realizing how stupid she sounded as she said it. Under duress. It came out of my mouth like a dragon's breath. She thought about trying to do a fire fist, but it felt like a bad idea, given the lack of experience and how badly her last one went. Yeah, I once got food poisoning from dodgy fire flakes too, Lex said. Doesn't mean I'm the reincarnation of Yang Chen. Well, I believe her, Lauger said, with a proud upturned chin, judging by the others. Judging by the others' expressions, his endorsement had the opposite effect. Oh boy. Okay, Karima said. Everybody calm down, take a breather. Let's consider this rationally for a minute. Assuming she is the... Kiyoshi, think fast! She uncorked her water skin with a sleight of hand. A pellet of fluid flew at Kiyoshi's face. Kiyoshi made an undignified squeal that should have disqualified her from holding any office whatsoever. She still couldn't bend any piece of earth smaller than a house, and the water aimed at her eyes made her flinch like a prickle snake had wandered into her sleeping bag. Prickle snake? That sounds like a snake-hedgehog hybrid. That's neat. Anyway. She threw her arms over her face. Spirits above, Lek whispered. Her cheeks burned in shame. Sure, she looked bad, but that bad? Kiyoshi, Rangi said, breathless and thrilled. Kiyoshi! The fan she'd been holding had come out of her belt as she clenched up in surprise. She was gripping it the wrong way, like a dagger. The tip of the weapon pointed to the little blob of water hovering in mid-air. Is that you? Rangi said to Karima. The stunned waterbender shook her head. Rangi dove at Kiyoshi. The water fell on her back, splashing them both. She squeezed Kiyoshi with a ferocious embrace. You did it! She yelled. You bent another element! As Kiyoshi struggled to breathe with an ecstatic firebender wrapped around her neck, she stared at the fan in her hand. Her mother's weapon had made the difference somehow, in both the element and the amount. She was sure of it. She looked up at the faces of the Dalfei. Lauger had a cool, knowing expression, but the rest were shocked into submission. They'd been smuggling valuable cargo the whole time. They settled down in one of the innumerable abandoned quarries that supplied the middle and upper rings of Ba Sing Se. The marker of wealth for most Earth Kingdom citizens was whether your house was built with stone from the ground below it. The farther the rock had to travel, the fancier it was. This quarry followed a seam of marble. The small canyon had been mined out in perfectly square blocks, leaving the edges protruding with right angles. They landed on a flat surface of swirled grey and white, resembling tiny figures on a giant fountain basin. The regularity of the stone fractures laid on top of the natural rock formations made Kiyoshi's vision blur. The first sign that something was off was Wong. He dismounted first, and then reached up to help Kiyoshi down. She frowned, assuming he was more likely to pick her pocket than act as a footman. She jumped off the other side of the saddle. Once they were all on solid ground, the original members of the Flying Opera Company backed away from her. "We need a moment to confer," Karima said. Kiyoshi and Rangi shared uncertain glances with each other while the Dalfei huddled on the far side of the marble cube, murmuring and whispering. Occasionally, one of them would poke their head up like a singing groundhog and give Kiyoshi a hard assessing stare before returning to their debate. "If they turn on us," Rangi whispered sideways through a forced smile, "I want you to take Peng Peng and run. I'll buy you time to escape." Kiyoshi found that scenario too distressing to think about. The sudden end of the gang's discussion forced her backbone straighter. They filed back over to Kiyoshi and Rangi as grim and wary and determined as the first night they'd met. Kiyoshi sucked in her breath through her teeth as Lex stepped forward. A mirror of that night, they'd almost come to blows. "It's been an honor to have traveled with the Avatar," he said. "We regret that we have to part ways." They bowed in unison, not using the Dalfei salute, but with their hands formally at their sides. Kiyoshi blinked. "Huh?" It doesn't have to be right now, if that's not to your wishes," Karima said. "I suppose you might want the night to plan your next move and leave us in the morning." It was the politeness more than anything that threw her off. "Ah?" They seemed as confused as she was. "You're the Avatar," Wong said. "You can't stay with people like us. It'd be an offense to the spirits or something." "Not to mention too dangerous," Lex said. He ran his fingers over his palm, where a blotchy red line remained, the artifact of Karima's imperfect healing. "We're still obligated to join the attack on Governor Taze. If we bail, Mok would find us eventually. When he does, well, being killed by a Shirshu would be kinder." You'll be safer the farther away you are from us," Karima said. Kiyoshi's mind reeled. Were they protecting her? She had been so certain that the first people who discovered her identity would take her hostage or rat her out to Jianzu. The Avatar was a tool. The Avatar was leverage. The master of all four elements lay somewhere between a bargaining chip to get you what you wanted and a blunt force hammer to be swung at the many imperfections riddling the world. No, you just thought that way because of how Jianzu treated Yun. "Kiyoshi, they have a point," Rangi said. "If you fall deeper into Mok's clutches, it will taint you forever." That was true. If she cared at all about being the Avatar, about someday holding the office and performing its duties, as Yun had already begun to, then she had to part ways with the Flying Opera Company and their debts. Otherwise, the association with criminals would mark her indelibly. She'd be unclean. The history of the Avatars contained rebels, enemies of tyrants, those who stood alone against the armies of the four nations when necessary. But as far as Kiyoshi knew, none had been self-serving outlaws. Time had always proven her predecessors in the right, and shown them as
Alright, sorry about that.
Hello! It's cool, no worries. Everything good?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Thanks.
Okay. Ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Okay,
Okay.
this is where we left off.
Yep.
avoid the
Yep.
Okay, whoops, sorry. I was gonna play and eat, but I'm feeling a bit nauseous, so I'll probably just eat and then come back in 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll just read more of the story to the dear viewers.
Oh, you were reading a story?
Yeah, I was reading.
They call me Flippy Dippy, just like Dippy Fresh.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to step away now, or
Oh, well, yeah, that's the door.
And shown them as champions of justice. Yun had told her that most Dao Fei respected the Avatar. She looked at her parents' gang and saw their swagger gone, their cloak of daring and confidence torn wide open. They had laid themselves bare in the presence of the living bridge between mankind and spirits. She couldn't explain what was so familiar about this situation, nor why she felt so compelled. The Flying Opera Company was not a bunch of innocent victims like the hostages kidnapped by Tagaka, needing a higher power to reach down and change their futures. They should have been capable enough without her, just like Yun. They reminded her of Yun, when he needed Kiyoshi beside him on the iceberg. They were her friends, and they were in a bind. Kiyoshi didn't turn her back on her friends. She swallowed her own misgivings and made up her mind. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I'm staying, and if I can help with the autumn bloom, I will. I haven't gotten my end of the bargain yet." The gang perked up. Logically, her promise should have made no difference to them. She'd been dead weight since the beginning, only useful because of Peng Peng. But they glanced at her with wonder in their shifting eyes. The same nervousness she knew she felt when Kelsang had tracked her down for the first time and lifted her out of the dirt. "You'd sully yourself with me?" "Kiyoshi," Rangi said. "Think about this to its end. The Avatar can't be seen attacking the residence of an Earth Kingdom official." "As far as the outsiders are concerned, I'm not the Avatar yet," Kiyoshi said. "I took the oaths of this group. I won't abandon my sworn brothers and sisters." Her choice of words was not lost on them, or Rangi. The firebender was torn between being critical of Kiyoshi's judgment and being proud that she'd brought personal honor into the issue. "You're not ready for anything resembling a real fight," Rangi said. "Currently, you are this group's biggest weakness. You're too valuable to lose, and you don't have the skills to defend yourself." "That's a little harsh," Lex said, of all people. "Hairpin's right," Kirima said to Kiyoshi. "Currently, we have until the next full moon to link up with Mok's forces for the assault. We can finally give you the training you were hoping for. That's what we promised you, wasn't it?" "It takes years for the Avatar to master all four elements," Rangi snapped. "And that's up with world-class teachers. I don't get the impression that any of you have a bending lineage to speak of." Kirima grinned. "No, but I've always wanted to start one. I'm not going to pass up the chance to go down in history as the Avatar's waterbending teacher." Kiyoshi could practically hear Rangi's blood boil. Through her mother's side, her family belonged to an unbroken line of bending teachers, who were considered some of the finest in the Fire Nation. They'd tutored members of the royal family. This plan required her to accept the shame they'd put off for so long. The most important bender in the world would have to bow to rabble. The Dao Fei watched the agony play out on Rangi's face. They were highly amused. "Listen up," Lex said. "We'd be teaching Kiyoshi to survive, not turning her into Yang Chen. Consider the raid on Tay as a practical exam." Whatever worshipfulness Kiyoshi detected earlier had completely vanished from their attitude. Kiyoshi supposed she only had herself to blame, telling them to think of her as their sister instead of the Avatar. Speaking of Yangshen, we're out of luck for airbending, by the way, Karima said. Either the two of you accept a few improvisations, or Kiyoshi remains the way she is. Weak, defenseless, a helpless, pitiable babe in the woods who can't... Kiyoshi aimed beyond Karima's shoulder and pulled a massive cube of stone out of the far side of the canyon. It went crashing down the cliff face, its corners shearing off, a die cast by a spirit the size of a city. The boulder hit the canyon floor and fractured into an army of slabs and shards that teetered on their ends before falling over flat. Despite the noise, Karima didn't give the landside a single glance. She stared at Kiyoshi, impassive, unimpressed. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she said. "You need more than one trick in your bag." Oh, I got something. You know what? I think I'll check out a couple of the memes from the GC-ness. You know, like, it's basically like... Yeah, it's interesting that I was reading Avatar: Rise of Kiyoshi earlier, because the primary aspect of the world building in Unicorn Warriors Eternal is that the main protagonists are all people who get reincarnated again and again throughout history, but instead of just being reincarnated, they actually get, like, body swapped into the bodies of other people. Like, there's this lady at a random point in time who's about to get married to her baby boo, and then this time-traveling robot zaps in and blasts the bride with the reincarnation juice, and one of the Warriors Eternal ends up taking over that person's mind and becoming a whole-ass new person, and it's very existentially horrifying. So, yeah, interesting stuff in my opinion.
All right! Now that's what I'm talking about. We road dogs again.